Thank you for listening to another episode of Considering the Source. I'm Scott Roark. A marriage of 24 years is about to end, and it's for the best. Recently, while we were producing another episode to cover the topic of domestic abuse, we put out an invitation to anyone who'd been a victim of this. We wanted to be able to hear a real-life perspective on this matter. Well, a woman actually reached out and said that she would be willing to share her story. And let me just say how thankful I am for that, because this is an incredibly painful story, not only to live through, but to then tell it to someone else. So I'm so grateful to her for doing this. After 24 years of marriage, this marriage is not yet finally at the end. With that in mind, to protect her identity and the identity of those who are involved, no real names are being shared. We will call this woman Gayle, and we will refer to her husband as Matt. As you listen to Gayle tell her story, one of the things that's most impressive to me is to hear the honesty, even when she addresses her own shortcomings. This isn't an episode of bashing on anybody else, but is to share her perspective and how she felt. How domestic abuse affected her mind, her spirituality, and her life forever. And in closing, I'll say this. We're surrounded by people every day who have powerful stories like this one. And hearing those allows us to stop judging and start loving and feeling compassion for them. This is my friend, Gayle. So, where were you born?
Upstate New York, in a rural area. Grew up on a farm, and grew up with an older brother, a younger sister, a couple of parents, and a very close-knit family, very religious, and lived there until I was about 13, and then we moved south.
Why did the family suddenly move south?
Oh, we moved all the time, actually, because my dad couldn't stay in one place. He was always needing to find a better house, find a better job, find a better place to raise goats, whatever the mm-hmm. He was always wanting to move. We moved south for a job.
Is it fair to say that even when you were in upstate New York, you weren't in probably one house, or were you pretty much there for your first 13 years?
I lived, by the time I moved out of my mom's home when I was 19 years old, I had lived in 21 different homes. So an average of a little less than a year in each place. Now, I lived in only 7 different states and maybe 12 or 13 different towns, maybe 15. I went to the same school for grades 1 through 5, but then a different one for 6. And then another one for 7, moved again for 8, and then finally 9 when I started high school. And I got to stay in one place for 4 years. But even my high school years, we lived in the same general area, but we lived in 5 or 6 different homes.
So you're a professional at moving. I mean,
yes,
no one can pack a box like you.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. I don't know if you know this, but I was almost the same. I tell people when I was 18, I lived in 18 different houses.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I tell people I went to 3 different high schools, and very similar to you. Like first grade was in D.C., second, third grade was at like a Christian school, then in 4th and 5th grade public school, then back. I mean, there was all this all over the place. And oh my goodness.
Did that make you feel, do you think that affect your level of security in life, like insecure in school settings, or did it enable you to make friends easily and get used to kind of moving all the time?
Well, what I tell people is that I can make a friend with anybody, but it's just a very superficial friendship.
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
the psyche is protecting itself. Like, don't get too involved
Right.
here. Remember when you had to leave Billy? And remember how much
Yes.
that hurt. And so you just have like a lot of these really superficial type of friendships. What's the
Right.
what's the longest friendship that you've had, or you still have?
No, I still have. I made friends with a neighbor girl when I was 7, and we're still friends. I've actually gone to visit her in recent years, stayed at her house. But I went to her house every summer for a couple of weeks throughout my entire childhood until we moved south. So my parents helped maintain that for me.
That was very good of them.
Yes, it was.
I think it's funny. A moment ago, you said something like, "So I only lived in 7 states." Like, you used the word "I only lived," and there are some people that are going to listen to this, and they've lived in one state, in one city, in one house their entire lives, and there are people that can't comprehend that. I'm right there with you, but
yeah, I get that.
but it's normal for you.
Yeah, it is. Moving a lot is. And then after I got married, my husband enlisted in the Army, and we moved again over and over and over. So it continued on. Yep.
So you finally had, when it sounds like when you were in high school, you finally settled down, meaning you could build some more long-term kind of relationships with the students in high school. How did you?
I could have, but I really didn't, for the same reason you just mentioned. What's the point? We're going to move again anyway, so I'm not going to bother. I kept everybody at a distance except for one guy. There was one friend that I let get close to me.
Yeah.
But other than that, not really. Not until I started college and I realized that if my parents decided to move, I didn't have to go. And that's kind of when I started to make some connections. So
you didn't even have a boyfriend in high school or anything?
I didn't. Nope.
You didn't make out with any guys?
I wouldn't say that.
I didn't make out with any guys. I'd like to go ahead and point that out right now. But I'm all right. On a serious note, all right. So did you enjoy high school, or was it just like, no, this has to be done. It's just a necessary evil.
It was a mix. It was a little of each. I enjoyed some of my teachers. I enjoyed some of the kids I went to school with, but my parents were going through a divorce, and my home life was so very stressful that kind of it kind of tainted the whole thing. It made it. I just got to get through this. That was just kind of how I felt all the time because of my parents' situation.
Can we talk about that?
Sure.
So how long had they been married, roughly?
They'd been married 18 years when they split. They'd been married for about 16 years when the marriage started to dissolve, but it was 18 by the time they actually divorced.
What was at the center of the split?
Well, my dad had an affair. Mm-hmm. I don't think that was at the center of the split, though. So I grew up in a very religious home, and when he had an affair, he betrayed his God, his church, as well as his family, and he worked for his church, so he also lost his job. He quit his job. He wouldn't have actually lost it because they should have fired him, but they wouldn't have. But he quit his job because he didn't feel he should be working in any kind of capacity that had anything to do with God or religion, because he had an affair. So to him, he was a sinner, and he had to be ousted, even if he had to do it himself. Mm-hmm. So he quit. And
may I ask what you think? May I ask what you think of that position?
It's honorable. It's an honorable way to look at it, that he took into his own hands the responsibility he held as a member of a conservative church.
Mm-hmm.
He held himself to a standard, and if he couldn't meet the standard, then he would have to deal with it.
Yeah.
I think it's really honorable.
Okay.
He was incredibly ashamed of himself, incredibly ashamed. And it was devastating.
Was it
to him?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Was it?
It was devastating to him as a man and as a family leader and as a father. He felt he didn't deserve any of those titles. He felt that he didn't have any right to discipline me or to parent in any way. And I actually had to urge him to continue to parent. Because it's amazing how much kids want to be parented.
You were how old at this time?
15 when it started. I was 17 when the divorce finally happened.
This relationship that he had, was it an ongoing thing, or was this a moment of weakness? Or
it was a moment of weakness. It started as a moment of weakness, but when he told my mother what he'd done, so he was a door-to-door salesman selling religious books, and he'd sold this woman a set of books, and she didn't pay for them, so he had to go back every month to collect a payment for the books. And when he would get there, she didn't have the money to pay for these books. They're expensive, and she shouldn't have bought them in the first place. But
she clearly didn't read them. I'm kidding.
They were children's books. She probably didn't, actually. She had a couple of kids, and my dad really felt sorry for her, and he just ended up spending too much time connecting with this little family and ended up having an affair. He told my mother about it, and 6 weeks after the first time they slept together, and my mother wanted to reconcile. And so we were living in West Virginia at this time. And as soon as she realized that he was kind of tangled up with this other family, she moved me and my siblings further south so that he would have to choose that woman. Her name was Karen. He would have to choose Karen or my mom. And in the end, he chose my mom. He moved with us, and that's when I started high school. And but life didn't just resume the way it had been. No. There was too much pain. There was too much betrayal, and they never worked it out. It was 2 years of a really rough time, and then they finally split.
So when I asked what was at the core of it, you mentioned the affair, but you said you didn't think that was it. What do you think it was?
No. Pressure. Too much pressure to be someone he could not be. He had severe PTSD from some experiences he had in Vietnam, and he also came from an abusive home. His father was very abusive, and he never resolved any of that. And he was a very troubled man. After he left my mom, he became an alcoholic, and he spent the rest of his life basically drinking. I mean, he was always a little bit inebriated. He was a highly functioning alcoholic. Mm-hmm. When I would see him and talk to him when he had been drinking, there was no slurring of his words or stumbling around or anything like that. Right. You would have never have guessed he'd had a lot to drink. Mm-hmm. The only thing that would indicate that there was alcohol involved is how emphatic he was in his arguments. They were just really, he would just get so hyper about things.
But whatever it was.
Yeah, whatever. He had strong opinions about political things and about religion. And so I heard a lot about that when he was drunk.
Yeah. Great conversation for when you're intoxicated.
It was really, it was kind of cool because he was pretty mellow when he wasn't drinking. And so it was cool to engage with him. I was intimidated. I was scared because when I was a kid, he'd been a little bit violent when he was angry. And so I was a little scared because he acted angry. He was being so intense. I thought I had it kind of confused in my mind. The intensity of his passion for, George W. Bush was mixed with the anger from childhood. I would see that coming through. So it was a little scary, but it was fun to engage with him anyway.
When you say that when you were younger and he was there and he was violent, do you mean like towards you, or he would throw things and break things, or both?
Both. He didn't. Nowadays, the spankings he gave would be called beatings and would be called child abuse. But in the 70s, they were like, yeah, well, that was a spanking and she deserved it. So, I mean, I probably wasn't disciplined any harsher than any of the other kids were, but I was left with bruises as a kid. So
was he? Would he use his hand or an object or a belt or
his hand? If you were lucky, his belt more often, and it was appropriate. It was on my butt. It wasn't across the face or anything else, the back of my legs or anything like that. And usually I had done something to provoke him, although most of the time when I had done wasn't worthy of a beating.
Right.
It was, but the slightest thing could provoke him, and then you were going to get it. And the hardest part was waiting till you got home to get it. That was torture. You're
just waiting because you've done something and mom's going to tell him, or she's already called to work?
No, because we were at church. Most of the time we were at church when I would offend him in whatever way. Or if we were already at home, he would just pick me up and spank me right there. But if we were at church, which we were a lot at church, 7 days a week we went to church for either church, school, Pathfinders, church, board meeting, whatever. There was always something going on, and we were always there. So.
And how was your mother during all this?
She would say, "Be quiet so he doesn't get mad at you." That was usually, we were instructed to behave ourselves. She was scared of him just like we were. He didn't hit her. He did throw furniture though and break it and other objects. And he always picked stuff that he knew was precious to her to smash. So it wasn't just a random piece of furniture. It was her favorite table that her grandmother, had left to her or something like that. Yeah. He'll
hurt her emotionally.
Yes, exactly. I think, I've read and contemplated when men are violent towards women, and by saying men, I don't mean to say only men are violent. Women are violent too. And often towards children, often towards men. I mean, it works both ways. But in my experience, it's been men towards women. So it's kind of my default when I mention it. But it can work either way. But when men are violent toward women, I've heard people say, well, it's because they lose control because they're so angry. But I don't buy into that. Because if that were the case, then when they got mad enough, they just go ahead. Well, here's an example. If a husband is mad at his wife and he comes in and he punches her in the face and leaves a huge bruise on her jaw, knocks her down the stairs, what stops him from going down, picking her up by the hair and slamming her head into the floor until she's dead? He has enough self-control to keep from becoming a murderer. So if he has the self-control there, I think he has the self-control.
Gotcha. He's measuring it. He measures it to a certain point.
That's right. This is how much damage I can do. When my parents were first married, my mom provoked my dad and he shoved her. And she stood up, shoved him back and said, "Don't you ever touch me again." So he never did. He never hit her again. And I think it's because he knew she wouldn't tolerate it. But when he smashed her things, she tolerated it. She didn't leave him. Right. She didn't. There were no consequences. So he could get away with that. So that's what I believe about it. That it's not about losing control. It's very controlled actions. So he saw something in the house that was precious to her and smashed it to be abusive in a way that she would tolerate.
You said you had an older brother and a younger sister.
Yeah.
How was his relationship with your brother?
His relationship with my brother, go ahead.
Is your father still alive?
No, he passed away in 2011.
Okay.
He passed away at peace with his kids. So there's a whole story in that too.
Okay. So tell me then, what was the relationship like with him and your brother?
He was harder on my brother than he was on me or my sister. He was hardest on my brother and then me, and then my sister, she barely got a spanking, barely. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure what the pecking order, why there was that pecking order of oldest to youngest. I don't know if it was because my brother's a boy, and I don't know if it was because I reminded him of my mother. I really don't know why he was that way, but the worst spankings were reserved for my brother. The worst, the harshest punishments were my brother's. And
like what?
The beatings were worse. The expectations were higher. One of the things that my dad did all the time when he wasn't angry, he was teasing. And in fact, that was one of the things that was confusing, because he could be teasing us and all of a sudden we're getting a spanking, and we didn't see the transition coming. It literally, I'm not exaggerating.
Oh, I don't believe you are.
When I was 6, I was sitting at the breakfast table and I'm dumping sugar on my cereal like as fast as I can before someone snatches the sugar bowl away. And my dad says, "You putting too much sugar on your cereal," but he laughs when he says it. And I was confused because I thought we were kidding around.
Right.
And I probably reached for another spoonful of sugar. I don't know what I did. I don't remember. But he's getting on my case about this sugar. And he's smiling and I'm laughing. And the next thing I know, he's picked me up and he's spanking me right in the middle of us joking about a sugar thing. And I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't know it was real. Sorry. And so it's very confusing. But he did that type of thing to my brother much more so than he did me. And I don't know why. My brother never knew what was coming.
Yeah.
It was really confusing.
I know people that speak of their childhood in that way, and it wasn't the abuse, the mental, the verbal abuse that they could deal with. It was the not knowing of what they're about to walk into, and the anxiety that gave them. Does that
exactly? Yes.
That ring true for you?
Yes, absolutely. You just never knew.
Right.
Yep.
So after they divorce, he's still, I presume, in the same town or city you guys are living in?
No. During the divorce, he broke the law. He was wanted in the town we were living in, so he had to move to another state. But fortunately, the border wasn't too far away, so he was only about an hour away.
Okay, hold on. What did he do?
He owned his own business, but he was leasing a building.
Okay.
And during the middle of the whole divorce thing, he disappeared. He literally, okay. So he cheated on my mom. We'd moved to a new town. They'd started to work it out. About 2 years went by. It wasn't working. And my dad freaked out one day and disappeared. So there's plenty of arguing going on between him and mom, and there was a lot of stress in the home, but we all thought this was our new way of life. Mm-hmm. And one night he just never came home from work and he disappeared.
Okay.
He was gone for a couple of weeks and my mom found him. So during those couple of weeks, the guy who owned the building that he'd been leasing to run his business mm-hmm. locked up the building with all of my dad's possessions inside of it. so my mom tracked down my dad, brought him back. My dad had been writing bad checks. And
Okay.
so this guy that owned the building hadn't been paid his last month's rent.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of garbage in there. And when my mom brought my dad back, they were like, well, we need to get our personal stuff out of there that's worth money so we can sell it because we're broke.
Yeah.
And so they broke in to that building to get their personal things out. And the owner of the building took my dad to court, and the judge fined my dad $100 for breaking the lock to get in. And my dad refused to pay it on principle because he said the guy had locked up his stuff. Yeah. He spent the rest of his life unable to come into the state that we lived in because he wouldn't pay $100 fine. So he was wicked stubborn that way.
Yeah. Does that story encapsulate a little bit of his personality?
Absolutely. Rebellious to a fault.
And all under it's the principle.
Yeah.
I can't, yeah. I know people like that.
Yeah. He said the fine is unjust. I'm not paying it. And so, yeah. And it crippled his relationship with his kids because we had to travel out of state to go see him. And we were teenagers.
Yeah.
And my sister was 13 years old. We weren't coming to see him. We were starting to live our own lives. My sister couldn't go see him, and he couldn't come see us without risking being arrested, which he did. And he did get, he didn't get arrested, but he should have been arrested. He didn't get arrested because my brother and I joined the fire department. So the police knew us.
Yeah.
So they'd pick up my dad and go, hey, you can get back over the border. They were really nice.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
So.
But anyway, yeah, he spent the rest of his life like that.
Is your mother still alive?
She is.
How has she been since the divorce?
She remarried shortly after the divorce and made a life of her own. That's really not at all very different from the life she had before. She married someone who's very mild and they just get along really great, and they moved to Florida. They live the little retired life down there now.
Okay, I was afraid for a second, you're like, she's a totally different person now. She's
No.
she's a roadie for Motley Crue or something. I didn't know what you were going to tell me.
No, she's just a retired, happy person dancing and partying in Florida. That's what she does with her life. Yeah.
So she's happy.
Yeah. So she is, I don't think she ever really found true happiness.
Even now.
But I don't think so. I don't think that she truly feels happy deep down inside. But I don't think that's really about my dad. I think that's about her own childhood and the pain she carries from that.
Okay. So you finish high school.
Yep.
You choose to go to college. I presume someplace close to.
Yep.
In the same kind of area.
Yep. I went to the local public university.
What did you choose to study?
I changed my major a bunch of times, but I ended up majoring in English literature.
Okay. And at what point in time do you finally run into? Well, before I even get there, did you date in college?
Yeah, I did.
Did you have a boyfriend in college?
I did.
Was it long term, short term, or?
It was 4 years. College took me 8, so that's not all of college. It was 4 years, but it was a bit of an on and again, off again kind of thing, but mostly on. I mean, I felt like we had a long-term relationship.
Why did that relationship end?
I ended it because I did not feel that he was the right person for me to marry. And the relationship wasn't going to go anywhere else but marriage. That's what he wanted.
Why wasn't he the right one?
Um,
Totally anonymous.
Yeah, that's important right now. He was not the right one because his focus in life was so very different from mine. I wanted to, I wanted God to be the most important thing in the world to me.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was dating him, God was not. And as I began to reorient my life so that God became the center of it,
Mm-hmm.
he and I began to drift apart.
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't see it being a fruitful relationship. I didn't see where we would be on the same page for the rest of our lives.
No, I fully get it. That makes perfect sense to me. And was it a situation where like you ended it not because of a fight, not because you didn't have feelings for the person? Does that define
exactly.
it?
Yes, exactly. It was torture. Ending it was torture.
Yeah, because you're still in love with the person, but you're able to see that this is not going to work out.
Right.
We don't have to even get to that point. I can see right now it's not going to. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. Which was the reason for the on and off that kept happening. The first couple of years were fine because he and I were on the same page. I didn't really care if God wanted to be part of my life or not. Right. I wasn't really interested. Yeah. But once I changed my mind about that, yeah, it was the last couple of years were harder to get through.
Because did you try to basically bargain with it? Did you try to think, well, I can probably live without it? Or
I told God, if there is any way that I can have you in my life and this guy too, please let it happen. I bargained with God, but I also bargained with the guy. I tried to coerce him, I guess you'd say. I'm not sure how you'd put it. Coerce him into going with me to church. And he did. Yeah. He was very cooperative. He's like, yeah, we can do the church thing. That's fine. And he would, study Bible studies with me, and he did all kinds of things like that. But I could tell he was doing it for me.
Right. And you wanted go ahead.
The weird thing is that now here it is 26-ish years later, he got married and ended up being more involved in his church. He it's not the same church I belong to. Mm-hmm. He went with a different church, and his involvement is that in that church is equal to mine, and his relationship with God, at least from what I can see, appears to be as genuine as mine is with God.
Yeah.
And as complete, that's the word I'm looking for, as complete and fulfilling for him as mine is. So maybe I was wrong. But at the time, that's what I thought. That's what I could see.
Do you have moments of frustration about that?
No. God was leading me. I'm not sure why, but he was.
Okay. So you still see this gentleman? Or you know?
I know him. Yeah, we're friends. Huh. Yeah, he's divorced and I'm divorcing. If we weren't, if he was still married, we wouldn't be friends. Or if I was still married, we wouldn't be friends.
No,
not because I think there's a problem with being friends with a married person.
Yes.
But someone you used to be in love with, it is a little sensitive.
Is this something that you think that you may pursue?
Oh, no.
Why is that? Did he gain a lot of weight? Did he lose all his hair?
No, he has a full head of hair.
You always strike me as being very shallow.
No, he has a full head of hair and he's not fat. He's all right. No, I just, I don't.
It didn't cross your mind at all?
Oh, it's crossed my mind. Sure. I just don't see that. There's two things. We are still worlds apart.
Theologically?
No, I think theologically we'd be on a similar page.
Okay.
But and a lot of other areas too. We have a lot of common interests. We both like to run and kind of athletic endeavors, stay fit, that kind of stuff. We both like that kind of things. So there's a lot of that. But there were other personality traits that were red flags to me.
Oh, okay.
And I just don't know. I mean, if God said, yeah, go for that, I'd say, well, all right then. But
okay.
I also will avoid dating anyone who's got kids.
And he has.
He has. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And he's very involved with them, and that's the way it should be.
True.
And I have mine, and I'm very involved with mine. And I'm not so sure I want to try to, oh man, remarriage is going to be really hard. And I don't know that I want to tackle remarrying with kids.
Right.
Both sets of two families. Oh, yeah.
The Brady Bunch was fiction.
Yes, it was.
So you and this fine gentleman who has a full head of hair and is super athletic, you guys break up. You begrudgingly, you see the writing on the wall, and you make the decision. All right, this has to end. How long until you start dating seriously again?
About 6 months.
And when did you meet your husband?
That's when I met him.
6 months later.
Mm-hmm.
Where?
And we met through through a mutual friend. We were at the fire hall, actually. I met a mutual friend there. He'd come to college in the town I was living in.
Okay.
Not the college I was going to.
Okay.
And I met him and thought, I'm not sure. I thought at the time, this is someone who is interested in spiritual things. This will be good for me. That's what I thought.
You say it that way. Does it mean that you believe that was a front? That it wasn't genuine?
No. I don't believe it was a front. So he was young. He was 21. I was 23. And he was not really convicted. He was not really convicted of anything except getting through life, just moseying along. And so he had recently gone through some kind of a religious experience not too long before I met him. And he mentioned that. And so I just kind of latched onto it. And I don't think that, I'm not saying that it wasn't genuine. I'm saying that it wasn't enduring.
Yeah.
I don't think it was enduring.
So you meet him. What's your first thought of him besides the spiritual thing?
Oh, he was pretty.
That just sounds genuine.
He was very pretty. Yep. I was very attracted to him.
Yeah.
Yep.
And where did you guys go? Like first date?
Our first date was to a evangelistic series.
Oh gosh. Boy.
Yeah, I knew you'd like that.
Yeah. Daniel and Revelation, I presume.
Something like that, yes. Something like that.
Yeah. Nothing says romance like the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
Nothing turns the ladies on like pictures of beasts coming out of the ocean with 7 heads and crowns and yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so
Yep.
But that probably didn't bother you, or did it? Like that?
No,
That's the first date. You're like, no, this is fine.
No, he was not pursuing me. I was pursuing him, and that's where I wanted to go. And he said he would drive, and we went with some other friends. It was not a
one-on-one date.
Yeah.
Okay.
We actually, I don't know that we ever had a one-on-one date.
Ever?
Probably, well, I mean, yeah, because later there were military balls, and I guess you'd have to call those dates. But there was no dating. There was no him pursuing me. There was never. It was me inviting him to church, inviting him to this seminar, inviting him to come hang out with me, inviting him to go for a walk with me. It was definitely driven by me the whole way.
Did you know that at the time and recognize it then, or you only see it now?
I see it now. No, at the time I was like, boy, he's really shy, you know. If now looking back, and he recently told our kids this, that he didn't want to get married, he didn't want to date me, he didn't want any of that, but he just kind of was along for the adventure of it. He didn't know it would lead to marriage, so he kind of felt trapped, actually.
And he told your children this.
He did. He told our kids are grown. They're adult children. Yes, he told them this. I'm not sure why he told them that, but he did.
All right. So you never have a date. You're always with people. Are you getting we're not always with people. We walk alone. We hang out alone. We make out alone. That was definitely by ourselves. Yeah. I would hope so. That'd be creepy. That'd be creepy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, do you feel like you're getting to know him? Do you feel like he's getting to know you?
I did. I felt that way. I thought I was getting to know the real person, the real guy. You know, in the coming years, I learned that I wasn't getting to know him. But at the time, I thought it was genuine. I liked his family. His family was a great substitute for what I didn't have. His family was close. There was
stability.
Yeah. They all live in one, and I'm not exaggerating when I say all. They all live on one piece of property in a little compound. And
is his last name Koresh?
So when I was dating him, they didn't all live there yet. There was his parents and one of his brothers, and his brother's wife and son, his grandparents, his aunt and uncle. So there was a few family members, a couple other strays that were there. But now, 20, we've been married 24 years this May. 24 years later, they all live there. All of his aunts and uncles live there. The ones that are alive are cousins. Everybody's on this little piece of property. And at the time, now I think, okay, that's not right. But at the time, I thought, oh, how nice. Everybody's so close, and they all support each other, and everybody takes care of each other. And this is what I didn't have in my family.
Right.
So I was drawn to that structure, right? The closeness and the support.
But there should be a happy medium. Like you guys are living on extreme opposite ends of this thing. You moving every other week, him only having more people show up, and it needs to be someplace in the middle. But no, you're absolutely right. When you're a victim to that, to either to your experience or to his. To see the other end is a bit refreshing. It's like, oh, this, because at least it's a pull towards the middle. It just so happens that it just continues to keep pulling you till it's the other side. But wow. So you're getting to know each other. How long did you guys date then before you actually got married?
2 years.
Do you remember when he asked you?
He didn't. I'm not kidding. He didn't date me. He did not ask me to marry him. My mother was putting a little pressure on me.
Okay.
Hey, you're 24. Don't you think you should think about this? There's not very many good ones out there left, and you should be getting married. And she put the fear of singleness in me, and I said to my boyfriend, I think we should get married. And he said, well, all right. So I started planning a wedding. That was how it happened.
There was go ahead.
So he felt very much controlled.
Yeah.
And I felt very much like, well, somebody's going to have to make this happen, so I'm going to make it happen. I didn't mind being in charge. I would have loved to have been romanced, but that wasn't coming, and I was very practical minded. Romance, you can take it or leave it, but a commitment, good family values, that kind of,
trumped it.
Yeah. And so I just pressed forward and we got married. We got married, and problems started that very day. I mean, it was immediate that there was problems because he didn't want to be married.
What happened?
So, well, we're really going to get into it now. I'm glad this is anonymous. So at the time, I didn't know that. So we're going to have to call him something. We're just going to call him Matt.
Okay.
Because I can't keep going without saying a name. It's confusing me.
Yeah.
So Matt was a porn addict, and I didn't know it at the time. So his expectations of what a wedding night would be, yes, what a sex life would be, were something I couldn't even imagine. I had never seen anything like pornography. I mean, back then there was no internet, so it was all magazines, and good girls didn't go in the back of the store behind that curtain. Or wherever they're kept. You know what I'm saying? The videos are in the back room. And so I knew nothing about what his expectations were, and he had not told me, by the way, I look at porn, so I'm expecting you to act this way. There's no communication about it. Yeah. And I expected a love relationship. Right. Something that included some eye contact. And we had sex before marriage. It wasn't that we hadn't had sex, but it was always we shouldn't be doing this. Well, we just did. So there was no, relationship that involved sex. Sex was just the taboo thing that we'd kind of tacked on to the end. So now here we are, and I think we're going to forge a relationship that involves sex, and he thinks we're going to have hot sex. Without any guilt or any fear of anybody walking in. That's right. And now this can be real now. Yeah. Yeah. So that didn't happen. Our wedding night was not at all like what he expected. It wasn't like what I expected. And so then the icing on the cake was that for our honeymoon, he planned to take me to his parents' house. Mm-hmm. That was his plan for our honeymoon. We were going to spend it at his family's compound. And so I said, okay, that's not enough for me. Let's at least go to Florida and hang out on the beach a couple of days, and then we'll go. So that's what we did. So once we got to his family's place, his attention was 100% diverted away from me. And I'm not exaggerating when I say 100. That's the way it always was. I ceased to exist as soon as we stepped onto that family property. And it just really confused me because I thought I had married into a family, but it has turned out that they still weren't mine. And when he arrives and his attention is 100% there, is it because of that's what he wants to do, or is the family saying, "Hey, over here," like they demand of him at that time, or is it a combination, or? The family dynamic is, so there's a mom and dad, and then there were 3 sons. And growing up, it was always dad and the 3 boys on one side, mom is on the other side. Mm-hmm. They did not see the value of my mother-in-law as a woman. Her value in life was cook and cleaning, and she needed to go to work too because my father-in-law is a Vietnam vet with PTSD, and he's not able to work. So she was the family provider, and there was
everything else. And everything else, yes. And but don't you dare talk. Was it one of those?
She did. No, she did.
Okay.
She does have a sharp tongue.
Okay. She deserves it. She deserves it, doggone it.
Yes, as if she didn't, they would have walked all over.
Yeah.
But my father-in-law had raised his sons to believe that women are not worth anything. There's no inherent value in a woman. She's there to cook and clean, and he will tell you that. This is not something I'm just supposing.
Mm-hmm.
He will tell you this. He'll say, well, yeah, that's what women are supposed to do. And then he'll say the man is supposed to provide, but he did not.
Mm.
And then so at this time, my husband's older brother is adopting the same kind of principles as his dad.
Mm-hmm.
He's staying at home. His wife's a nurse. She's working. They have a baby, and they're not identical. He does. My brother-in-law does housework, and he does cook. So it's not like an exact replica of his dad.
So he's a disappointment to your father, is what you're saying.
He very well may be, but his value of his wife is the same as my father-in-law's value of his wife.
Right.
They're not valuable in any kind of emotional capacity.
Right.
She doesn't give him anything. There's nothing in her except for her material worth.
Yep, you are a resource.
Yes, exactly. And please provide me children. That's another thing that's important.
Yes.
So this is, I come into this, and my mother-in-law is so happy to have me, and my sister-in-law, they're like, oh yes, another woman. We may win this yet. No, we won't. But so that I'm very valuable to them, and it's men against the women. It's two different teams, and no matter how much I try to describe to my husband what I see,
yeah,
he never sees it, and it remained that way. One of his complaints about me was I refused from the beginning to move to that compound. I just always refused. We lived 1,000 miles away.
Mm.
And I said, yep, I'm going to keep it that way because this isn't safe for me.
Yeah.
And so shortly into the marriage.
Well, can I ask you?
Yeah, go ahead.
So you said that he was a porn addict. Is this like your conclusion, or is something that he would even acknowledge, or?
Oh no, yeah, he acknowledges that now.
Okay.
He didn't tell me then, but years later, when I confronted him, he admitted that he'd been looking at porn since middle school.
Okay. And like, what did that porn addiction look like?
Well, it was harder to get porn when, in the early years before the internet. And he found magazines that belonged to somebody else in a building out back behind our house, and he would go back there and look at them, and I didn't know. Mm-hmm. So that's basically what, and then I didn't realize this, but cable was provided as part of our rent in our home. Yep. And I didn't realize that there were porn channels on there, but he was looking at those when he could, which wasn't a whole lot because I was there. I was a stay-at-home mom.
But you didn't know he was watching it.
No, I didn't know he was watching it. I one day he and I were flipping channels, and the kids were little, 4 and 5 years old or so, and I stumbled on it, and I was absolutely shocked. It was the first time I'd ever seen porn, and I said, "Oh my word!" I turned to him. "Did you know this was on here?" And it was written all over his face, although he denied it. And then so that night we go to bed, and he wants to do the same position we just seen on this porn thing, right. And I went, "Oh, that's why all these different positions have been things he's been wanting to do." Now, I said that subconsciously. This is where, and before that, I had said, "Cool, he's trying to bring some
Spice.
Fun, some play, yes, into this." And I was like, "This is good." Well, let me back up a little bit more.
Sure.
shortly after before we got married, I went on birth control pills, which were really bad for me, hormonally speaking.
Okay.
And so I had to go off of them pretty quick so that I would want to have sex. And that's how we ended up with a baby. Birth control just doesn't work well for me. The different kinds that we tried, which were 4 or 5 different kinds, there was always some kind of an issue.
Uh-huh.
And so 18 months into our marriage, we had a baby. That was not good. That was, we really didn't even get a chance to get started in life before we had children. So we had 2 kids back to back. And
like, what's the
kids?
You had the first one. How long until you're pregnant with the second?
7 months. I got pregnant 7 months after the first one. And that's really lousy for sex life too. Kids are, toddlers are,
tell me about
preschoolers are. Yeah.
Tell
So we really, when it comes to sex, we didn't really have a fair fighting chance to connect as a couple sexually. And so anyway, I'm figuring out, so I think he's trying to bring spice into the marriage. I'm figuring out, he's replicating what he's seeing, but I still didn't consciously fully realize it. I didn't realize, one, the harm in it.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it as, it's not that big a deal. He's just looking at, I'm not the jealous type. I didn't take it personally.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really worry about it a whole lot. In 2002, he enlisted in the Army. Kids were 5 and 6, and he deployed and had the internet. And from then on, it was pretty much a part of his life on a daily basis. At least while he was deployed or away, which he was away most of the time for the next 15 years after that. His second deployment, he had an emotional affair. And when he came back from his second deployment, it was rough. He was mean. He was mean to me in a way that he had not been before.
Okay.
So before that, there was always problems, but this new treatment of me, it was confusing. I didn't understand why he would say the things he would say. They were really unkind, and I'd think, wow, he must be really in a bad mood to be saying something like that. And
like what?
In front of his dad one day, he just out of the blue said, Kim doesn't perform well for me in bed. What I don't know what that means. I didn't know what he meant by it. Why he would say in front of his dad, I didn't get it. And I was just totally blown away.
Yeah.
If you have a problem with your wife in bed, talk to her about it. Take it to a counselor, but it was said in a cutting way, not in a, Dad, we have a problem and I'd like to talk to you about it. It wasn't even that,
right.
Which would have been way inappropriate anyway. But it was like it was demeaning.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, I'm confused. And so late. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Later, I said to him, "Why did you say that you want? What is it you want from me in bed? Why did you say that to your dad?" And he denied he'd said it.
What?
He said he never said it. So then I was confused. Did I hear it or not? Yeah, maybe he said socks, and I thought he said sex. It was just, if it had been that one time, I would have assumed I did mishear. But for years, the same kind of thing would go on and on and on, and a lot of lying, a lot of
about what
weird thing. He told his parents that I didn't bathe our kids, and I didn't understand why he would tell them that, because it was simply not true. I bathed the kids. I didn't get it. I didn't understand his point. What was he trying to accomplish?
Mm-hmm.
I guess it made me look like an unfit mother. And maybe that's what he was trying to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
It often the things he would say about me would be to his parents, but they weren't just to his parents. When we were living, we were based in Germany, and he was, when we moved to Germany, he couldn't reach his parents. They were on the other side of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And we could talk to him on the phone, and he did that. But the connection was definitely lessened. So I kind of took advantage of that. As soon as we got to Germany, I thought, okay, we're isolated from the rest of the world. I am going to turn it on. Mm-hmm. I'm going to make this marriage amazing. I'm going to do everything he wants. I'm going to be whatever he wants, all of it. I'm giving it to him. And I would initiate sex all the time, several times a week, which you'd have to understand. He didn't initiate sex ever. So any sex that was initiated between us was initiated by me always. So
you're blowing my mind right now with that statement.
And it's unusual for a porn addict to not be initiating sex. That is a weird thing. Yes. I'm not sure what was up with that. I've never figured that one out. But he didn't, there was no affection to start, he didn't give me any affection or anything like that. There was a lot of teasing with a little bit of an edge to it. So you could say, oh, that hurt. Or you could say, oh, he's just teasing me. Mm-hmm. It could go either way, depending on how do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. When you can pick on somebody, you can mean it in a mean way, or you can.
Yeah, when it's done properly. Yeah, when it's done properly, they can't tell if it's a joke or you're actually angry at them.
Yes, if it's done properly, that's right. Like my dad. How interesting! I married my dad. So anyway, he didn't, and I don't know why he didn't initiate sex, but he didn't, and so it had been really difficult over the years to be that person to have to always be initiating sex. But if I didn't, the consequences were more anger from him and more rude comments from him. But if I did initiate sex, he was at least nice to me for a couple of hours. So, it was not easy. It's not easy for a woman to initiate sex anyway, because we just don't want it the way men do, generally speaking, usually. But typical women.
My brain is trying to process this because, like, when I'm trying to understand it, I'm picturing your dad, your father-in-law, and his wife, and even this goes back to, even this is the woman's responsibility. You know that I want it, and so it's going to be up to you to go ahead and initiate it and everything. And like,
I had never thought of that, but you're right, and that's exactly what Matt would say to me is, I always want sex, and you know that, so you just, whenever you want it, you just say so.
Yeah, so, don't wait for me to be nice. Don't wait for me to light a candle.
No, that's not happening.
I'm always on go. You just,
Yeah.
Oh.
So anyway, we get to Germany, and I think we're safely far away from his family. So I turn it on. I initiate sex, sometimes 3 times a week, sometimes more. If he's home, he did missions and stuff, so he wasn't always home. But when he was home,
how long were you in Germany?
3 years.
Oh my God!
So I didn't do this the whole 3 years.
Okay.
But
because you're going to get an award.
So no, no, not quite. And so let me pull back just a little bit. Over the years, when he was nasty towards me, I wasn't Miss Sweetness back. I would snap back with a sharp edge, and I was nasty back.
Okay.
So prior to this time that I'm starting now, it was definitely rough both ways. It's not like I was always doing just the right thing.
Yeah.
But so I'm gonna have to come back just a little bit to explain.
Sure.
One more thing.
Yeah.
I told you I'd always refused to move to the compound.
Yeah.
But his family was very persuasive and pushed really hard for us to move there. Well, when he enlisted in the Army, he sealed that deal. We couldn't move there because he belonged to Uncle Sam. So they gave Matt and I a piece of property that's part of the compound, and I refused unless it was titled to our name.
Mm-hmm.
And once they said, okay, we'll do that, which they didn't usually, not everybody, I kind of started something there. So now everybody has their own piece, or most everybody does. But prior to that, it was just owned by the family, and then you could build on it. Well, I said, no, that's not going to work for me. If we're going to build anything on it, we have to own it. So they gave us a couple of acres, 5 acres or something, and we built a little vacation home on it. And I wanted that because then I wouldn't have to stay with my in-laws when we visited.
Yeah.
And we would go up there to go snow skiing in the winter or whatever. And I took the kids there every summer and stayed for a long time in the summers. And so, I mean, it's a beautiful spot. It's in New England. It's a really nice little piece of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So, so we had started building this little vacation home. All it was a little foundation, and we had paid as we'd gone, and so we're getting ready to move to Germany. Matt has orders. We're living in the deep South on an Army base, and Matt says, I want to finish the cabin and rent it out to my younger brother. And I said, no, we're not doing that. There was lots of good reasons not to do it. One, I don't want to build a cabin and rent it to Matt's younger brother. When Matt's younger brother moves out, who's going to pay for the payment on this cabin that we'd have to borrow money to build it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just refused. I said, it's not a good idea. We don't even own our own home. We're not going to go into debt to build a vacation home. That's foolish.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really put my foot down. So Matt makes arrangements to go up and see his family, and he's going to be up there for 2 weeks, and the kids and I can't go. We can't afford to go, and we normally would have driven for those trips, and I don't remember why we didn't drive, but we couldn't afford plane tickets for all 4 of us, so his parents buy him a plane ticket, and he goes up. And I'm thinking, well, we're not going to see anyone here for 3 years, and and I was used to by then to him having a relationship with them that excluded me. So for him to go, I didn't think a whole lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
While he was up there, he borrowed $60,000 from his brother on his brother's home equity loan, and spent 2 weeks building the rest of the cabin. He's a builder by trade, and he spent 2 weeks putting $60,000 windows, a roof, and finishing the rest of it, putting in a bathroom, the whole everything. And
never asks you.
No. And the whole time he's on the phone with me each night trying to convince me that this is a good idea. And by the halfway through the trip, it dawns on me, oh, he's already done it. I mean, he had lied to me many, many times through the years, and I had gone behind my back in other ways. So this was the stretch. $60,000 is a lot of money, to borrow behind your spouse's back.
Yeah.
So I didn't really expect it, but it wasn't a complete shock that he did it. And so I realize he's already done it, and I kind of have to choose then. I can be livid and throw a fit over this, but it's done. There's nothing I can do to undo it. We now owe $60,000 to his brother. And so I agree to take a mortgage out on this home, and we let his younger brother move into it while we're gone.
The very thing you said I didn't want to do.
Yes.
Is exactly what happens.
I mean, exactly. Yes. And one of the reasons I didn't want to do it is when his brother moved out, I knew that we would have an empty house on the compound, and they don't want to rent to outsiders. So then what? Yeah,
it's literally just going to sit there.
Yeah. And we'd be paying a mortgage on
it.
So we wouldn't be able to afford it. it was really a really stupid thing to do. So anyway, it's done, so I can't do anything about it. And so when that happens right before we go to Germany, so I felt really betrayed. But we go, and I said to myself, okay, I have to make the best of this. This is my last shot. Mm-hmm. And that's when I decided, okay, I am going to turn on the charm. He's not going to be able to resist me. He's going to learn to like me. And I did everything I could imagine. He went on to Germany ahead of me by a couple of months. So we'd spent some time apart, and I had prayed through that time, God, I somehow have to forgive, move on, and make this marriage work. And I asked for that grace to be able to do it. Mm-hmm. And I felt that when I got to Germany, I had that. It was a gift from God. It was, here you go. I'm going to help you get through this. So I turned on the sex, I turned on the cooking, I turned on all the charm. When he would come home from work, I would be just roll out the red carpet, everything I could think of to make his life wonderful. And his response to me was initially, wow, this is awesome. He was so excited. Everything was great for a few months. And then his mom and dad came over for a visit. And he completely changed, went right back to the way he had been before. And after they left, he never was kind to me again after that. It was always dogging me, finding fault with me. He criticized food. He even criticized sex. I never understood how you can do that. I mean, how bad can it be? That anyway, it was just
it's an impossibility.
It seems to me. I mean, you're getting laid, buddy. Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
But anyway, so he criticized me all the time, and then so the wives are all living. We're all isolated from our families. Mm-hmm. The guys are all going to work, and there's some women soldiers who are at work too, but most of them don't have husbands. Most of them are single women. Mm-hmm. Most military women, once they get married, they often retire from the military and just be wives. Mm-hmm. They don't have to, and some don't, and it's awesome when they can continue in their career or whatever. But there's a lot of wives at home, and we don't. Most of us didn't get jobs because we're in another country, and there's only just so many jobs on post, and we kind of all just enjoy it. Really, it's like a mini vacation for 3 years. So there's a lot of wives at home. We do a lot of socializing. We travel together, whatever. And I begin to sense something among these wives, and I can't tell what it is. I can feel that something isn't right, and I can't tell what it is. And finally, two of them talk to me and say, if you knew what your husband was saying about you at work, you'd kill him. It's nasty. The way he talks about you at work is horrible. So our whole marriage up to this point, we've been attending church. We have the facade of the Christian family that doing all these little church things or whatever, raising our kids according to biblical standards. Is really, and then I just kind of got sick of it. Why would I go on in this facade? What's in this for me? I'm being treated badly, and my husband is pretending to be a godly man, mm-hmm. but when he goes to work, he's talking filth. I would hear him talking with the guys, and I would hear crude comments, and he'd be like, well, what the fuck? And I'd think, oh, we don't say that word. Mm-hmm. I was just, but the way he would even say it, I could tell that
it was way too natural.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a forced. Yeah.
No.
Mm-hmm.
And well, I mean, it kind of must have been hard for him to maintain these two different, you know.
Yeah.
He's one person at home and one person at church, and then he's another person at work. That's three. There's three right there. He's maintaining these three different personalities.
Right.
And he started taking our kids for outings. And I stayed away from the outings because they were very unpleasant for me. He made them very unpleasant. And one of his favorite things to do is to try to so we're living in a foreign country. Everything's in a foreign language. I can't follow a map because I can't make sense of it. I don't know how much you know about German, but their words are really, really long.
Yep.
They take the compound word, shove them all together, and make one big long word.
Yep.
And so reading a map is really hard. It's not like Main Street, First Street. It's like, yep. It's not like that. So I can't read a map. And we would go into a city, and he would walk so far ahead of me that I couldn't tell when he'd made a turn around a corner, and I didn't know where he was. So I'd feel lost and I would panic. And the other thing he would do is leave the apartment and take the GPS so that I would be trapped at home and I couldn't leave. So I'm feeling panicky just about my everyday life. This person I'm with, I don't know him. Who is he? Mm-hmm. And I'm in a foreign country. I can't go anywhere. I can't even leave my apartment. I just felt very isolated. And the only resource I had was a group of women, military wives, that I studied the Bible with. And it was an awesome group. There were 5 of us, and there were 5 different denominations represented with the 5 of us. It was so freeing because we had 5 different perspectives, and we all respected each other's perspectives. Mm-hmm. And it was really, really nice. It was really good. And so these women, I start to confide in, hey, my marriage is shit, and I don't know what to do about it. And they were really there for me. Mm-hmm. But these are some of the same women whose husbands work with mine. And they were like, yeah, well, we know. And this is what we know. And my whole world is just kind of imploding. And so then Matt's taking the kids on outings, and I'm not going because I'm scared. I'm scared to go on an outing with them because he'll lose me in the city and I won't be able to get home. Mm. And so
intentionally lose you.
Yes. Now, most of the time he would, so my daughter would kind of try to keep up with him. He walked really fast, and my daughter would be next behind him, and then my son, and then me. So I would only know that Matt was up ahead because the kids were in between. Mm-hmm. So I didn't actually usually get lost, but it was just the fear. And it was the fear that my kids are ages 11 and 12, and they're here on the street somewhere between me and Matt, and I don't know, I don't know. I don't know if somebody's going to grab them or if they're going to make a wrong turn and we're all going to be separated in a country where.
Yeah. The word relaxing or fun doesn't come into my brain at all in this.
No.
Anxiety and stress.
Yes.
And frustration.
And a daily migraine, by the way. I had them every single day. So I was right at the edge of my sanity. And one day I just cried out to God and said, God, I don't know how to get out of this. I'm stuck and I don't know what to do. And shortly after, I just started kind of praying, praying more of a, instead of being in charge, before that I was in charge of my prayers. Mm-hmm. I was in control. I would tell God this and I would expect to hear this back or whatever. And it was the first time I'd hit this point where I was completely surrendered because I had to be, because I had no answers. And so I I submitted. And shortly after that, I stumbled on an article called "The Silent Killer of Christian Marriages." You can find it if you Google it. It's out there. It described Matt's behavior pretty much to a T. It talked about a man who goes to church and maintains this position in church, who talks the talk, but is demeaning to his wife at home. And it just opened my eyes for the first time that what was going on in my home was abuse. Before that, I thought it was awful hard to live with, but I hadn't seen, I just never connected all the dots before. And I just was, my eyes were opened. And I felt like the Holy Spirit had led me to the article. And I just started reading about different kinds of abuse and spiritual abuse, and even his wanting me to not be able to leave the house, that kind of control. I hadn't seen that as abuse. I just thought it was him being mean. So
how would you describe the abuse, or I presume there are probably different types of abuse that he perpetrated against you? What would you label those?
So when he was abusing me, Matt's a narcissistic covert abuser. The covert part of that is key. Being as secretive about it and unobtrusive as he can be was important to him, so that at any point, if I should say, why did you just do that to me? He could say, what are you talking about? The covert abuse, it lends itself to every kind of abuse. Spiritual abuse, just by pretending to be a Christian husband and a Christian man, I wouldn't go so far as to call that abuse, but by using it against me covertly, that's when it becomes abuse. And in other words, a man can be a fake, going to church and coming home and not being the same person at home, but that doesn't make him spiritually abusive to his wife.
Okay.
But by using that to manipulate her behavior, then it's spiritual abuse. Here's kind of an example.
Okay.
We were raised to believe that drinking was wrong. We shouldn't drink alcohol under any circumstances. And he and I had both drunk when we were younger and had quit about the time we met. I'd never really thought a whole lot about it, except we don't drink, whatever. Okay. So when we got to Germany, drinking is part of the culture there.
Yeah.
And there were wine tastings a lot. And I would sample wine with my friends. I didn't think a whole lot about it. I wasn't getting drunk. I was just going to, it's literally in a little shot glass and it's wine.
Yep.
And so when I mentioned it to him, he just blew a gasket. I can't believe you would do that. And just went on and on and on about it. And I backed right down. Oh, I'm so sorry. I did not know it would be offensive to you, And so I quit. When I would go with my girlfriends, I would say, yeah, sorry, can't do that. It bothers my husband.
Meanwhile, he's looking at porn night and day.
Not only is he looking at porn, but he was going to nightclubs and he was drinking. But I didn't know that. When he would be on missions, I learned this about a year ago. So yeah, and yes, looking at porn as if you could even, yeah. And but he told me about a year ago when we were trying to reconcile. um, that back then he was going to nightclubs with the other soldiers when they were out on missions and drinking.
Mm-hmm.
So he's drinking and forbidding me to.
Right.
But his behavior was in secret. And so to me, that's spiritual abuse, because he was using our religious upbringing to wield control over me. And the reason for it, I don't know. I don't know why he didn't want me to drink wine. I don't know why he didn't just say, it's no big deal. But maybe it was just for the sake of making me miserable. I mean, maybe that was his goal. But it just, that's, I mean, I kind of put that into spiritual abuse just because he's using our religion to exercise his control. I didn't go to church when we lived there because I didn't want to go anywhere with him. And so he would go to church by himself. And he used that
to guilt trip you.
Yeah, you're a horrible woman because you won't go to church. And I'm sitting there thinking, yes, but I'm saying kind things to my children at home. I'm not. I mean, the character, the what really makes us Christ-like,
isn't where we go on the weekend.
And so that it was really, I didn't want to go to church with him because I didn't want to be with him. And I never knew what he was going to say. And I knew what he was saying about me at work by then. So I already knew that the people out in our community, it was embarrassing. It was really embarrassing. So, I mean, I don't know if I'm answering your question. I forget what your question was about abuse.
Well, yeah, I was saying, like, what types of abuse how would you label it? Was it like physical abuse? Was it mental? Was it emotional? And you're saying spiritual. I'm hearing
it was, it was certainly spiritual. It was certainly emotional. There's no question it was emotional. And I think it was emotional more than it was spiritual. But to me, that's just a given. That's like the first line you cross when it comes to abuse. In other words, if it's physical abuse, it's also emotional abuse. If it's spiritual abuse, it's also emotional abuse.
Okay.
You can't really separate emotional abuse from the other kinds of abuse.
Did it ever become physical?
I've done a lot of reading about abuse in the last couple of years. And advocates of survivors would say that emotional abuse is physical abuse because of the damage that it does to the mind. So in that regard, maybe. But Matt never hit me. He never pushed me. No, he never laid a hand on me. It was always emotional or verbal. Yeah,
and I think as a society, I think that we do, and we're probably incorrect in it, but we put more negativity on the physical, and the bruise will heal. The arm will heal, but like the emotional scarring that you do doesn't go away quickly.
Yes, and we also expect that a woman who's involved in a relationship where there's physical abuse, that she has not just the right but the obligation to get out of the relationship. But a woman who's being emotionally abused, okay, no,
he hasn't hit you yet.
Counseling,
you gotta hang in there.
Yeah.
You had mentioned though that he'd had an emotional affair.
Yeah.
Describe that.
Meaning,
who was it with? How long was this? How do you know it was only emotional?
I don't know that it was only emotional. I just know that it was at least emotional. It was in 2005. It was his second tour in Iraq. And he left for the tour. When he left for the tour, our marriage was on a pretty good chapter considering where we'd been up to that point. And it was an excellent chapter compared to where we would go from that point. But while he was on the tour, his phone calls to me became fewer and fewer. And when he did call, he was angry. And I didn't understand what was going on. I couldn't figure out why he was angry when he'd get on the phone with me.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't make any sense of it. He would ask me questions about his family. At the time, I was living near his parents. I wasn't actually on the compound,
Mm-hmm.
but I was renting a house there. And I'd moved up in that area for the year while he was gone, in hopes that it would bring peace and harmony to him and to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to live alone on an Army base for another year. We just finished one. His tour before that had been 8 months prior. They were really quick, back to back. And so his phone calls were kind of strange. And I thought, oh, he's resentful because I'm living near his parents and I never let him come up here. And now I'm experiencing this with our kids, and that's probably why he's resentful.
Mm-hmm.
And he kept talking about, and I can't remember her name anymore, but I'm just going to say Smith, Sergeant Smith. And he was referencing Sergeant Smith all the time. Sergeant Smith and I did this. Sergeant Smith and I did that. It turned out, I found out later that Sergeant Smith was female, but I never picked up on that in the conversations, meaning he was careful not to let that slip out.
Mm-hmm.
She.
Mm-hmm.
It was always just Sergeant Smith.
Did he refer to others in that same manner, like Sergeant Connors and everything?
Yeah, but I sooner or later would hear more about them and know what was going on. It turned out, Sergeant Smith was in charge of securing supplies in Iraq, and she had to go by herself to get these. This is what he told me.
Mm-hmm.
So he volunteered to go with her because she shouldn't be going alone. Now, he told me this after he got home. Well, the story doesn't add up, to be honest, because the soldiers don't go alone anywhere in war zones. They simply don't. It's just unheard of. Mm-hmm. So I know that that's not true, but regardless, I just, at the time, just let it go. And but I heard him telling his dad about her, and he referred to her as Jennifer. And then I walked in the room when he was talking about Jennifer, and he was referring to her as Jennifer. And I said, "Who's Jennifer?" And he said, with this kind of sheepish look on his face, "Sergeant Smith." And I went, "Oh, I see how it is." His affection for her was evident in his conversation with his dad. So, I mean, he could say it was completely platonic, but I'm just not stupid.
Right. Now,
I was then. It's just not even reasonable. Correct. That there wasn't some kind of emotional involvement.
Correct.
Yeah. So, I don't know if maybe that relationship with her, is sometimes, I think, I've thought back and I've thought maybe in contrast, he's comparing me with her and the demands that I put on him as a young wife and the disappointments I brought to him in marriage. And maybe it was just the contrast of me and Jennifer that were the trigger. But he came back from that deployment a very, very angry person and very different. And he came back from every successive deployment after that one more angry and just really afflicted with PTSD. That between pornography and PTSD, he kind of didn't have a fighting chance in learning how to handle his emotions.
Yeah, I would imagine. Are you doing okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
I would imagine that, after you've been married for a number of years, that honeymoon phase is done. And, you've seen this person in good and bad, smelling good, smelling bad, looking good, looking bad. I mean, you've been through a lot, and that is reality. And you're now so far away from that fuzzy, warm feeling that the new relationship offers.
Yeah.
And I would guess that for many men, what you went through is common, because all of a sudden now that fantasy that Sergeant Smith is offering is done, and now I'm now talking to my real life wife on the phone.
Right.
And
right.
And the fantasy is over, and they're coming to grips with that.
And even more so when he had to return from Iraq.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. At least when he hangs up on the phone with you, they can still go hang out. When he makes the flight over, it's done.
Right.
Oh.
So when we moved from Germany, we'd been there for 3 years, and towards the end, I sat down with him and I said, "Look, it's obvious you're miserable in this marriage, and I think we should just finish this off." And it kind of shook things up for him a little bit. And over the next couple of years, I began to withdraw and pull away because we didn't divorce. We came back to the States facing an 18-month military separation, first for training and then for a deployment. And in the next 7 years that followed that, there were 3 deployments. And deployments are a year long, but they're saddled on each side with separation as well for pre-deployment and post-deployment exercises. So a 1-year deployment really represents more like 18 to 24 months of separation. So during the next several years after that, there was very little time together. So we didn't divorce, but I retreated emotionally and began to live separate emotionally. And he didn't live with me. I moved back to the town we lived in when we first met, because it was the closest area to the base where he would be. It was a couple hours from his base, so he could come home on weekends
and see the kids.
And
it wasn't about you anymore. Is that true?
No, that's correct. But after a couple of deployments, he decided he wanted to make the marriage work. And that was really unsettling for me because I'm emotionally independent now. I have no need for him in any way, emotionally speaking.
Right.
And even though I have never been romantically involved with anyone else since we got married, I don't feel any need to actually to have another relationship. So I hadn't moved on in that regard, but I'd certainly moved away from him. And so he's wanting to get a second chance. And I was thinking,
that ship has sailed.
Sorry?
That ship has sailed?
Yeah, that ship has sailed. Yeah. And not just that, but if I go back into this, am I going back into some more hell? And I did give it a half-hearted effort, but it was very quickly obvious that he had not changed as a person. His heart is not softened. His porn addiction continues. Although that was not the reason I didn't go back into the relationship. That was just yet another I don't know, mark.
Yeah.
I guess, just okay. Still have that problem. It just, yeah.
So shortly thereafter, I presume it got to the point where it became official. All right, we're going to go ahead and we're going to actually divorce.
Yeah.
Did he give a fight at any point in time in that initial decision then?
No.
And so now you're at a point, it's not official yet.
No.
It's like, how far away do you think it is until it's like, boom, the gavel hits and it's done?
Well, he filed in January, and right now it's the end of April. So, I don't know, another couple of months. It just depends on what the fight looks like, whether or not we have court next Monday. If he's willing to settle out of court, I say we have court. We have a date to meet with a mediator. So it's not actually going to court, but if we can settle out of court then it'll be done pretty quick after that, within a couple weeks, I'd guess. If not, then it's a battle. But he's not being very, very generous right now with terms. So,
are you expecting a fight then?
Yeah, I'm expecting a fight. He doesn't want me to have his retirement. He feels like he earned it. The military retirement is a generous one. It starts when you retire, not when you're 67 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so he retires in about 4 years. And he doesn't want to give up that money. So I expect a fight. But the state of Tennessee is pretty, they're pretty straightforward. 50% of his retirement should be mine.
Okay.
And I don't want to be, I'm not trying to take what's not mine. Mm-hmm. I don't want to make his life difficult, but I spent 24 years counting on that for my retirement too.
Correct. You were doing, listen, it would appear, here was the deal. I'm going to go do this. You stay here and you do this with the kids and everything.
Right.
And you did that role.
Yep.
So I'm with you. I wouldn't look at you and listen to stories like, oh yeah, she married him for that retirement. I'm never hearing anything like that.
No, I didn't marry him for his retirement. No. I mean, I would be thrilled if I didn't have to rely on him financially. It would be great, but his earning capacity is 4 times mine. So, I'm kind of stuck.
So I'm going to ask you a couple closing questions. We get in this time machine and you and I can go back, and your mom is talking to you as a 24-year-old. What do you say today? If you could go back, knowing what you know, because it might not be, I don't know. What would your response to her? She's like, you're going to be single. She's freaking you out. What do you say to her today?
Well, the one lesson that I have learned in life is that there's really only one reason to get married, and that is for love. And it has to be 2 ways. Mm-hmm. So if I'm in love with a man and he's not in love with me, that's not a good idea. So in other words, just being in love is not enough. Mm-hmm. Being loved in return. So if I were to go back, knowing what I know, that's what I would say. But if I were to go back, knowing what I know and not marry Matt, who would I have married? Maybe I wouldn't have married. Maybe my life would have been painful in some other way. Who knows what my lot would have been. I ended up with 2 great kids and have a pretty good career now. I'm okay.
So what would you say to a 24-year-old? Somebody comes to you at work, they're 24, and their mom is giving them the same kind of statement that you were given. What do you say to that 24-year-old? Not you as 24, but a 24-year-old wherever you work.
I'm a little reluctant to give other people too much advice because everybody's situation is different. But there is one thing I would tell them.
Okay.
Similar to what I just said.
Marry for love and being loved.
Yeah. And God created man. This is me talking, and I'm religious, so you're gonna get a little of that.
It's okay.
God created man in the Garden of Eden, and he woke up and looked around, saw the animals, said, "Oh, those are cool, but where's my wife? Where's my mate?" And then God put him to sleep and gave him one. So God waited until Adam wanted to be married before he gave him a wife. I would tell anyone who is asking me, wait until you want it to do it. Mm-hmm. Don't do it if you don't want it. And it's really hard. Kids are marrying later in life, so maybe it's not as hard. But when I was in my 20s, everybody was looking around at each other going, how come you're not married? What are you waiting for? And I wouldn't want my kids to get married just because it's the thing to do.
Right. What would you say to somebody who is in the same kind of abusive relationship, or it doesn't even have to be a marriage, I guess, and they're dealing with some of the same kind of things that you dealt with? What advice would you give them, either to endure or how to endure it or how to resolve it?
I don't think that it can be resolved. I think that 99% of the time, men or women who are abusers remain abusers. I know that's a pretty strong statement, but it is what I believe.
Is it what you believe? I guess what I'm asking is, I think that is the possibility of change there? Yes. Is the likelihood great? No.
Exactly. That's exactly what I believe.
So we might as well just say it's not going to happen.
Right.
Okay.
The likelihood is yes, the possibility, everyone can change. Yeah. But the likelihood is pretty slim, and I wouldn't want to be that person that's waiting for it to happen.
Right.
Matt kind of vacillated between loving me and hating me our whole marriage. So if anyone could have, I would have thought he would have, because I saw it so many times. I saw his heart turn towards me so many times, but it always snapped back, kind of stretching like a rubber band, and then released, it would go back. So I wouldn't tell anyone to endure it. I would never tell someone, wait it out, it'll be all right in the end. I would never tell anyone that. And I wouldn't be likely to give a whole lot of advice, but if I did, restoring sanity is not as easy as it seems. I have complex PTSD from the years of abuse. It's been a huge battle to try to defeat that and be a survivor rather than a victim. Everyone should have that opportunity to become a survivor, and they can't do that until they're out from underneath the abuse. It's really a lot easier said than done, though, especially for people who have children who are relying on them.
You are blowing my mind with that statement, though, that you have to get out of it. Like
you cannot recover in it.
In it, right?
I mean, that's like telling an alcoholic, yeah, you can keep drinking. You need to defeat the alcoholism. You don't. That's not how it works.
Right.
Well, it's a little different because one's an addiction and the other is not. But it's the same bottom line. You cannot recover from something while you're in it. You recover after you're away from it.
So you are still married at this point in time. So the marriage is how many years then?
24.
And how are you feeling emotionally today compared to, say, 4 years ago?
So over the last, especially 10 to 15 years or so, when I would think of Matt or talk about Matt or know that he was approaching, in other words, a tour was ending and he was going to be coming home, I would physically shut down. I would have migraines. I would be in my bed. I would shake, tremble, anxiety in my chest. I couldn't do anything with it. Paralyzing. I would be paralyzed. I would sit in a chair and not even move sometimes for hours thinking about what was coming. And what was coming was pure emotional. It wasn't even, I wasn't even about to get beaten. It was just I can't even really fully describe it. Now, I'm like an entirely different person.
Were you once again facing the uncertainty?
So I was facing, when Matt would speak to me, it was demeaning. And I would be facing the beliefs about myself that I believe what he was saying was true. That's really what I was facing. I was fighting that conviction that he knew the truth and he was telling me the truth.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. He's trying to reshape your identity.
Yeah.
And you're
program my mind.
Yeah, and you're having to figure out, is he right?
Yes. Yes, exactly.
And so here you are now. So in 4 years, you find yourself in a position, I'm not doing that anymore. I know who I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
And go ahead.
When he decided he wanted to work on the marriage, his idea of working on the marriage was, well, let's just start talking again. He said, I'll email you, you email me, we did the first deployment, we'll do it like that because we live separately. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't email you. When your emails come to me, I have panics. I have a panic attack. I can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
I need complete separation. And he wasn't interested. So, yeah, he had convinced me by then that my value was pretty much nothing. And I had to allow, it was basically me and God reprogramming me. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just God telling me, oh, you're valuable, or or I'm protecting you. That there was that element in there too. Mm-hmm. But God changing my own value of myself, my own self-esteem.
Yeah.
I guess I'm kind of rambling.
No.
I don't guess I answered your.
No, I think I'm picking it up. It wasn't you just figuring out who you were. It was you and God ultimately figuring out this is who you are.
Yeah, and it's not like God. It wasn't like, oh, I read the Bible and okay, God values me. It's not like that. There's something inside of us that's inherently valuable because of who we are, because we are created by God. And that inherent value, I had to come to know that.
Yeah. And that's a deep thought. That's a deep thought in that the worth to God isn't because of what we do.
Right.
Or what we look like. It's
because of who we are.
Yeah. Wow. Well, let me just say, my mind is blown tonight to hear this story. And just as you're able to look at your dad and say, his decision to do what he did was honorable, I would label you in the same way. There are people who would, to their own detriment, still, if they found themselves in your same situation, still sit there and be beaten up by it. There are other people who would have left a lot earlier and just not even tried. But I think that your position is honorable because he was pretty. And you can acknowledge that. And I think it's honorable that you're able to acknowledge, like, yeah, this is what I did. I drove this thing a lot of the time. But I also see that you wanted something positive for you, for your children, and I believe ultimately for Matt. But
for sure,
yeah,
I really did. I thought when Matt's Army career began to become an amazing success. He really was amazing in the military. They move up in rank it's hard to explain. It's a complex system,
Yeah.
but he moved up very quickly in rank and was very well respected, and became an officer, from enlisted to officer, and just he became a helicopter pilot. I was immensely proud of him, and thought that he would feel a sense of worth that would come from his career, and I thought that would be what would bring him around. I thought he'll get that satisfaction, he'll feel good about himself, and then I will no longer be his target. So, I really did have a hope. I had a hope for quite a while.
I believe that.
And I don't regret the 24 years. I don't look back and think, oh my word, I wasted my life. I've grown immensely. And sure, it would have been nice to have been married to one person and to have spent my life in love with them and them with me. But, that's a dream not many actually experience. So I don't feel it. My lot has been less in life. And I have two of the most awesome kids in the world. And, I'm so grateful for that blessing as well. So.
Well, thank you.
Well, you're welcome.